You might have seen that Amber and I have been doing some collaborations lately where we've been painting some pictures together, and we were given this absolutely incredible opportunity to paint something for the BBC. And we were asked to paint a picture to promote David Attenborough's new series, Frozen Planet 2. And it was such an honour to be asked to do this. And we thought we'd share the process with you and answer some questions about the collab along the way. For most of our paintings, we'll put together a mock-up using Photoshop, or in this case, Procreate on the iPad. This is usually a mix of combining images and digital drawing.
I spent a few hours collecting some different reference photos to show Daniel, then we sat down and worked together to come up with an idea. I really liked the pose of this one.
I love that, but I really like that.
Oh yeah, that was one of my favourites. I love the dark you got in the sky as well, because I thought there's some really nice contrast there with all those lights and the darks as well.
I like this one walking off. I want him knocked back to the same sort of point as him.
We wouldn't even need to include those two together.
Yeah, it would be nice.
Nicely. I wonder how they'd work
with the other
first one.
Yeah.
I think that was like something that's going to happen. That's what I liked about that one. And if you look, the lightings actually would match.
The lighting comes from this side.
Yeah, just not on that one.
No, it comes from the other side. Well, that's okay, because we could just flip one. We could just flip
this. The other side. We wanted to create a new image that had not been seen before, so we didn't want to use one single reference photo. We took inspiration from lots of different photos to create a composition that we were both happy with.
We decided on a family of polar bears in the snow with the northern lights in the background, which actually caused a few logistical issues with like the whole composition, but we'll talk about that a bit later on.
So in terms of where we find our reference photos, there are a few go-to sites that we would check out. So wildlifereferencephotos.com, Pixabay, Unsplash. So yeah, we just did a really wide search for polar bear pictures really, didn't we?
Yeah. Sometimes we will take our own photos, and actually I prefer to work from my own photos, but we can't actually get out and take the photos in the wild just yet. So we're a little bit limited to where we can actually go to collect reference photos.
To start off the painting, we wanted to work from the furthest point to the closest. So we started with a background sky. The northern lights can only really be seen at night, but we didn't want our polar bears to be too dark.
We used a little bit of artistic license and decided to set our scene around dusk, so that the lights are starting to become visible, but the polar bears are still quite bright and definitely the main focus of the piece. We started with brushes, blocking in the main blue colours of the sky. Then to create that softer focus coloured aura, we used an airbrush.
We then added some subtle details to the lights to finish them off using a normal paintbrush.
Usually when we are painting these collabs, we're trying to do something a little bit different that's different from my style and different from Amber's style. And the way we usually go about it, we both literally paint on the painting at the same time.
This painting was a little bit different, so we were asked to do a realistic painting. So I feel like we needed to have a slightly more planned and measured approach to this painting, so we did seem to take in turns a little bit more.
Yeah, and because this painting takes a little bit longer, like realistic paintings take a little bit longer than our other collabs, I, with work, couldn't fit in the actual painting hours, so sometimes Amber took it home, sometimes I had it at my house, in my studio, and we'd just work on it together at some points and then separately at other points as well.
I took the painting back to my studio while Daniel was at work. The next step was adding in the icebergs. I started by focusing on the basic shapes first, where the rock is visible and which parts were covered in snow or ice. I gradually moved in on each section and started to add some more details. The key thing when painting rocks or glaciers using my technique is to work in thin layers, so all of those subtle colours show through and help depict the form of the rocks.
Amber brought the piece back to my studio and we worked together to block in the snow and the foreground of the painting. This was just the first layer, so we didn't go into loads of detail, and again, just as with the rocks, we like to work in lots of thin layers with the snow. This helps to get all of those transitions softer, a little bit more subtle, and it's especially useful working in layers when you work in acrylics like we do. We were actually at an exhibition recently and we were showing quite a few of our collaborations, and one of the questions that we actually got asked quite a lot was, do we get into fights while we're doing this? And surprisingly, no, we've not yet so far anyway.
Yeah, it's really good fun actually doing the collaborations. I think like this painting highlighted though, with us both painting in a realistic style, just how different approaches we have. Like I thought that we had quite similar techniques to painting, but I think this actually highlighted that we do actually approach things slightly differently.
We started the polar bears together. We each took a cup and we began the blocking process. Amber takes a slightly more controlled approach with the blocking, whereas I just like to throw some paint on the canvas and get started with it. This meant that I moved on to the fur texture of my polar bear first.
I like to focus a bit more on the colours and getting everything in the right place with the blocking, whereas I think Daniel likes to focus more on the lights and shadows and worries about the colours later.
We then switched bears. Amber started to glaze some colours over my cup, and I started to add some fur detail to hers.
Once we'd got them to a similar point, we worked together to finalise the lights and shadows to make them look soft, fluffy and three-dimensional.
Next, we moved on to the bigger polar bear. By this point, we'd settled into a nice routine for who does what. The techniques that I use in my paintings are slightly different to the techniques that you use, and I can see that in the brushwork of your paintings when I get really close to them. I'm sure you can see it in mine. And it's this thing that even though we both paint hyper-realistically, or like we're trying to paint realistically, the painting itself still looks like a painting because there's those differences there. So it's like, as I keep trying to tell you guys when you're watching, that just because I'm painting something in a certain way and you try to copy that way, it doesn't mean your picture's going to look exactly the same as mine, because you're going to have little unique things that you're going to add to that picture. I've got little unique things that I add to my paintings, just as Amber's got little unique things that she adds to hers. And even if we painted the exact same photo, we're both pretty decent painters. We can both paint realistically, but those paintings would look completely different. Or at least up close they'd look different, because of the different techniques and different processes that we have.
I started with a blocking layer for the big polar bear.
Then I took over and added the fur detail. From the cubs, we found that this approach of Amber doing the colour first and then me doing the details afterwards gave a really nice look to the fur. We then sat down and had a think about what to do next. We usually like to carefully plan our collabs to make sure nothing goes wrong. So, not every painting, no matter how thoroughly planned, is going to go according to that plan every single time. And we actually found that out. We wanted to set the mood a little bit more with the polar bear painting, and we decided that we wanted everything looking a little bit colder and a little bit more blue.
So we decided to airbrush a blue layer over pretty much the entire painting.
And that wasn't the best idea. It didn't quite go the way that we wanted it to. Everything just took on this blue hue, and which is what we sort of wanted, but it wasn't the way or the appearance that we actually wanted. So it did take a little bit of time for us to actually rectify it. And one of the questions we do get asked is, how do we fix things when they go wrong? And you just got to do it. Don't be scared to change things in your paintings. For me, if something goes wrong in my painting, I'll just paint over it. I'll just start it again. I don't know about you with your paintings.
I feel like that's the beauty of acrylics, is that you can just keep going until you're happy with it. Like there wasn't a particularly strict time limit. We could just keep going until we were happy.
Yeah, and it is just persevere. If you're trying to create artwork that is gonna sell at like a high value, you've got to make sure that you are happy with everything and everything looks right. If there's something that doesn't look right or something that you're not happy with, then why would a buyer be happy with that piece as well? So you've got to really, really commit to a painting and commit until it's done, not just like take shortcuts and cheat your way through it. You've got to make sure that you're putting in care and attention to detail, even if you're not actually painting details themselves, but you've got to take that care and make sure you're happy with the finished piece before you call it finished. It was a bit of a struggle, but we managed to get the piece back to a place that we liked.
This stage is all about getting the final colours and details right. For this step, I took over the painting, but Daniel was there too, and we discussed the painting process along the way. We decided together which colours went where and any adjustments that needed to be made. The majority of this process is about glazing thin washes to adjust the colours and values. We wanted the colours of the environment to be reflected in the coats of the polar bears, so this meant adding some pinks, greens and blues. This is something we do quite a lot in our paintings, as it ties the subject and the background together.
The rest of this painting process was just about tying up some loose ends and making sure that every single part of the painting all worked well together and all added to the composition. To finish this painting, we used a glossy acrylic varnish so that it was prepared and sealed, ready for framing. So, as we said earlier, we took the polar bear piece all framed up, we took it to the exhibition, and we met some amazing people at that exhibition, and we were very lucky to meet James, who absolutely fell in love with the polar bear piece that you can see here and actually bought it. And it was amazing talking to James and all the other people that came to the exhibition. It's one of probably the best thing about actually being there and showcasing your artwork.
Yeah, it's something that we very rarely do. We probably only do a handful of exhibitions each year. So it is really nice to see people's reactions to our work.
It is. It's nice talking to them, and it's nice being able to tell a story in person rather than just through Instagram and rather than typing out a story. It's nice to be able to actually tell the people that are there what inspired the piece. It's nice for them to ask questions and want to learn more about you as an artist, and that's what these exhibitions are for. So if you are an artist and you're just starting out, or you're pretty established but you've not done any exhibitions or art fairs, I strongly recommend getting out there and giving it a go. I absolutely love working on these collaborations with Amber because it's really nice sort of getting out of your comfort zone and challenging ourselves, but challenging ourselves to paint differently and doing it together and spending a bit of time with each other and learning each other's techniques and styles and the way that you do things and the way that I do things and mashing them all together to create these collaborations. But I think the bit of this polar bear painting that I enjoy the most has got to be the colours in the fur. Like, as you've seen in the video, Amber did the fur colours and I think she absolutely smashed it. The colours of the fur, and you can't really see it and appreciate it until you see it in person. The subtle little pinks and blues and greens and yellows from those northern lights and from that background are just really, really nicely and very subtly placed in the white fur of the polar bears. And it just brings them to life and ties them into the background. And yeah, that is probably my favourite part of the painting.
So I think one of my favourite parts of it is the colours as well. But I also really like the relationships between the bears. I like how the two in the foreground are making eye contact with the viewer, and then you have the little one at the back catching up. I just thought it made like quite a sweet image overall, and it's a nice dynamic to it.
Yeah, no, it was really nice, and I think that is kind of like a little bit more reflective of, or very reflective of what goes on in the wild with these mother polar bears and their cubs as they're travelling across the ice and travelling through like this environment and looking for food. And yeah, after watching Frozen Planet and seeing these polar bears, because we actually painted it and finished it before Frozen Planet came out, so it was really cool seeing what we'd painted like actually being there in real life, and the way that we painted it, the relationships that we painted, and the story that we put behind the painting was actually what was going on. And yeah, it was just so incredible to see it. If you haven't already seen it, I really highly recommend that you go and check out Frozen Planet 2. If you're thinking about entering an art exhibition and you want to learn a little bit more about the process that myself and Amber go through when preparing for them, then check out this video here.
As always, thank you so much for watching.
And we'll see you next time.